Jasmine Williams watched in horror as the white gate agent deliberately tore her student visa in half, smirking, "Looks fake to me." Her Harvard dream shattered in seconds. Then her phone rang, U.S. Embassy on the line. The agent's smile vanished as security approached. Before we dive deeper into this shocking story, where are you watching from today? Hit that like button if you've ever experienced or witnessed discrimination while traveling, and subscribe to join our community fighting for justice. How would you react if someone destroyed your future with a single tear of paper? Let's find out what happened next. 21-year-old Jasmine Williams had always been exceptional. Growing up in Lagos, Nigeria, she had maintained perfect grades throughout school, published research papers before finishing high school, and now had achieved what seemed impossible, a full scholarship to Harvard Medical School. Her brilliance had opened a door that few from her background ever got to walk through. "You are destined for greatness," her mother Adaora had whispered the night before her departure, pressing their foreheads together in a moment of connection that transcended words. Her mother's hands, calloused from working 3 separate cleaning jobs to support Jasmine's education, gently cupped her daughter's face. Her father Solomon, once a respected structural engineer in Nigeria but now driving taxis in Lagos because his credentials weren't recognized, had sacrificed everything for this moment. He had sold their family land, worked 18-hour days, and postponed medical treatments, all to ensure Jasmine could pursue her studies uninterrupted. "You carry all our dreams with you," he said, his voice breaking as he handed her a small wooden carving of their family symbol. "But more importantly, you carry your own." The visa process had been a nightmare from the beginning. While her white classmates who had received scholarships to American universities seemed to breeze through with minimal documentation, Jasmine had faced countless hurdles. 3 separate interviews at the U.S. Embassy in Lagos. Demands for additional financial records beyond what was required. Intrusive questions about her real intentions in America. "We need to be certain you plan to return to Nigeria," the visa officer had said with thinly veiled skepticism, despite Jasmine presenting a comprehensive 5-year career plan that included returning to establish a medical clinic in underserved areas of Lagos. When the visa finally arrived, 1 week before her departure, her entire neighborhood had celebrated. Children from nearby homes had danced in the streets. Teachers from her former schools had visited with gifts and advice. The local church had held a special blessing ceremony. The night before her flight, her closest friends had gathered for a farewell party. They ate jollof rice, danced to Afrobeats, and shared stories late into the night. Her best friend Folami had given her a journal. "Write everything down," Folami insisted. "Your story will inspire generations." The morning of her departure arrived with heavy skies threatening rain, unusual for that time of year. Her parents interpreted it as ancestors weeping with pride. At Lagos International Airport, Jasmine faced the first taste of what awaited her. Despite having all documentation meticulously organized in a folder, she was pulled aside for a random security check while white travelers walked through unhindered. "We need to verify these documents," a security officer stated flatly, taking her passport and visa to a back room for 30 minutes while the departure time for her flight approached. "This happens to me every time," whispered an older Nigerian woman beside her, also waiting. "They hope you'll miss your flight. Stay strong, daughter." Jasmine barely made it to her gate before boarding closed. Settling into her economy seat, heart still racing from the sprint through the terminal, she tried to calm herself by visualizing the moment she would walk through Harvard's historic gates. A flight attendant named Patricia noticed Jasmine's distress and paused during drink service. "First time flying to America?" she asked kindly. When Jasmine nodded, Patricia briefly sat in the empty seat beside her during a quiet moment in the flight. "My daughter studies at Howard University," Patricia shared. "Let me tell you what to expect and how to handle yourself. America can be wonderful and terrible at the same time, especially for young black women like you." For the next 15 minutes, Patricia gave Jasmine practical advice about navigating American culture, dealing with microaggressions, and finding community. This unexpected kindness brought tears to Jasmine's eyes. The 14-hour flight gave Jasmine time to reflect on her journey. She reviewed her acceptance letter for the 100th time, reread the orientation materials, and practiced introducing herself to her future classmates. In her mind, she walked through the Harvard campus, imagining herself in laboratories and lecture halls, contributing to medical breakthroughs that would save lives back home. When the plane finally touched down at JFK International Airport, Jasmine felt a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. The New York skyline through the airplane window represented both the culmination of her past efforts and the beginning of her future. She had a 2-hour layover before her connecting flight to Boston. Following the crowd through customs, Jasmine presented her documentation to an officer who barely looked at her before stamping her passport. This brief moment of normalcy gave her hope. Perhaps Patricia's warnings had been overstated. Perhaps her experience would be different. As she navigated toward the terminal for her connecting flight, rolling her single suitcase containing everything she owned, Jasmine felt a growing sense of unease. The terminal was crowded with travelers from around the world, yet she noticed how people subtly created distance around her when she sat down. An empty seat remaining on either side despite the crowded waiting area. When her boarding group was called for the Boston flight, Jasmine approached the transfer desk with her passport, visa, and boarding pass ready. The moment the gate agent looked up and saw her face, something shifted in the atmosphere. A subtle hardening of features, a slight narrowing of eyes. In that microsecond, Jasmine felt the weight of assumptions being made about her before she had spoken a single word. She didn't yet know that this man, Harold Peterson, would attempt to destroy everything she had worked for. Passport and boarding pass, Harold Peterson demanded without the courtesy greeting he had offered to previous passengers. His voice carried a coldness that made several nearby travelers glance up from their phones. Jasmine slid her documents across the counter, maintaining the polite smile her mother had always insisted would open doors when others tried to close them. Peterson, a white man in his 50s with thinning gray hair and a permanent frown etched between his eyebrows, barely acknowledged her smile. Harvard Medical School, he questioned with unmistakable skepticism, examining her student visa. This is a very selective program. Yes, sir. I received a full scholarship based on my research in cellular regeneration, Jasmine replied, the pride in her voice impossible to suppress despite her growing discomfort. Peterson's eyebrows shot up. He looked from the passport photo to Jasmine's face repeatedly, as if confirming they matched, something he hadn't done with the European students who had passed through moments earlier. Wait here, he instructed, taking her documents to a computer terminal several feet away. Jasmine noticed him making a phone call while looking in her direction, his expression darkening. Meanwhile, a blonde woman who had arrived after Jasmine was processed through a different gate agent with minimal questions and a friendly, "Enjoy your trip to Boston." After 5 uncomfortable minutes, Peterson returned with another airline employee, a younger white man whose name tag identified him as Brandon Taylor, supervisor. "Miss Williams, we have concerns about your documentation," Taylor stated without introduction. "The visa doesn't appear to match our verification standards." Jasmine's heart began pounding. "I don't understand. The U.S. Embassy in Lagos issued it just 2 weeks ago. Everything is in order." By now, several passengers had slowed their pace, watching the interaction with undisguised interest. Jasmine felt sweat forming at her temples despite the terminal's aggressive air conditioning. Harvard doesn't typically accept students directly into their medical program from Nigerian universities, Peterson added, his tone suggesting he had caught her in a lie. "Especially not on full scholarship. With respect, sir, they do when the student has published research in the Journal of Immunology and received recommendations from 3 Nobel laureates," Jasmine responded, fighting to keep her voice steady. "You can call the admissions office to verify. I have their contact information." Taylor exchanged glances with Peterson, a silent communication that excluded Jasmine entirely. "We have protocols for suspected fraudulent documentation," Taylor announced loudly enough for nearby passengers to hear. "Security has been notified." Jasmine felt her chest tighten. This couldn't be happening. There must be a misunderstanding. My visa is legitimate. Please double-check with the embassy. We've seen high-quality forgeries before, Peterson replied with a satisfied smile that suggested he was enjoying this moment. Nigeria is known for document fraud. An older white couple nearby pulled their luggage closer, as if Jasmine might steal it, their reaction to the word fraud immediate and telling. That's a completely unfair characterization, Jasmine protested, her voice rising slightly despite her efforts to remain calm. I've spent years earning this opportunity. Please just verify my documents properly. Peterson's face hardened. Don't raise your voice at airport staff, miss. That's considered threatening behavior. Jasmine hadn't raised her voice, but she immediately lowered it, recognizing the dangerous territory Peterson was pushing her into. I apologize if I seemed upset. This is very important to me. Classes start Monday, and I can't miss orientation. Well, that's going to be a problem, Peterson replied, picking up her student visa. He examined it under the desk lamp, turning it over repeatedly. The hologram doesn't reflect correctly. And this signature looks suspicious. Before Jasmine could respond, Peterson did the unthinkable. With deliberate slowness, maintaining eye contact with her, he tore her student visa directly down the middle. The sound of ripping paper seemed to echo in Jasmine's ears. This is obviously fake, he declared loudly. Security will need to investigate how you obtained it. Time seemed to stop. Jasmine stared at the destroyed document, unable to process what had just happened. Years of sacrifice, thousands of hours of study, her family's investment, all potentially ruined by this man's unilateral decision. You can't do that, she whispered, shock making her voice barely audible. That's a legal government document. If it were legal, I wouldn't have been able to identify it as fraudulent, Peterson replied with circular logic. His smirk revealed a flash of satisfaction that transformed this from a procedural issue into something personal. Taylor nodded toward approaching security personnel, 3 uniformed officers moving purposefully through the crowded terminal. You'll need to come with security for questioning about fraudulent entry attempts. The public humiliation intensified as travelers openly stared and whispered. Jasmine felt her breath coming in short gasps. The terminal lights seemed suddenly too bright, the sounds too loud. The symptoms of a panic attack were setting in, something she hadn't experienced since her final exams. Please, she managed to say as the security officers surrounded her like she was a dangerous criminal rather than a student. Call the embassy. Check with Harvard. I've done nothing wrong. One security officer, a white man with a military-style haircut, took her by the elbow. Come with us, miss. Causing a disturbance in an airport is a federal offense. Jasmine hadn't caused any disturbance, but she could see the narrative being constructed around her. Black woman. Nigerian. Fraudulent documents. Becoming emotional. Each element building a case against her that had nothing to do with reality. As security began escorting her away, Jasmine felt the weight of injustice crushing her chest. Her vision tunneled, breaths coming in painful gasps. Everything her parents had sacrificed, everything she had worked for, destroyed in an instant by someone who had decided she didn't deserve her achievements based on nothing but the color of her skin and her country of origin. The last thing she saw before being led away was Peterson gathering the torn pieces of her visa and dropping them demonstratively into a waste bin, his message clear: you don't belong here. Excuse me, but what exactly is happening here? The authoritative voice cut through the tension like a blade. Jasmine turned to see a black woman in her late 30s approaching with purposeful strides. Dressed in an impeccable charcoal suit and carrying a leather briefcase, she projected an aura of unmistakable confidence. This doesn't concern you, ma'am, the security officer holding Jasmine's elbow replied. Airport security matter. I'm Zoe Patterson, attorney with Caldwell, Bennett, and Patterson, the woman stated, presenting a business card to the officer. And when I see a young woman in distress surrounded by security with no apparent cause, it absolutely concerns me. The security officer's grip on Jasmine's arm loosened slightly. Zoe Patterson turned her attention to Peterson and Taylor, who were watching from behind the counter. "Did you just destroy this young woman's visa?" she asked Peterson directly. "The document was fraudulent," Peterson replied, his certainty wavering slightly in the face of legal credentials. "And you're qualified to make that determination? How exactly?" Zoe countered. "Last I checked, only State Department and Homeland Security officials have the authority to invalidate visas. Airline employees certainly don't." Taylor stepped forward. "We have protocols for suspicious documents, which don't include destroying them," Zoe interrupted. "Suspected fraudulent documents should be reported to CBP while remaining intact as evidence. Destroying potential evidence could be construed as tampering, which carries serious penalties." Jasmine felt a flicker of hope as she watched the security officers exchange uncertain glances. The officer holding her arm released it completely. "I would like to see the torn visa," Zoe continued, addressing the security team. "And I'd like to know why this young woman is being treated as a criminal when the only person who's broken any regulations appears to be your gate agent." One of the security officers, younger than the others and visibly uncomfortable with the situation, spoke up. "Ma'am, we were just called to respond to a reported disturbance. The only disturbance I'm witnessing is the violation of this young woman's rights," Zoe replied. She turned to Jasmine. "May I ask your name?" "Jasmine Williams," she answered, her voice steadier now that someone was advocating for her. "I'm a student traveling to Harvard Medical School. My visa was legally issued by the U.S. Embassy in Lagos 2 weeks ago." Zoe nodded, then pulled out her phone. "I'm going to take photos of what's happening here, with your permission. Then we're going to retrieve what remains of your visa." As Zoe began documenting the scene, other passengers who had been watching pulled out their own phones. The public nature of the confrontation was shifting from Jasmine's humiliation to accountability for the airline staff. Peterson noticed the recording devices and his demeanor changed instantly. "There's no need for all this. We were simply following security protocols." "Then you won't mind if I record those protocols being followed," Zoe responded coolly. She walked to the waste bin where Peterson had discarded the torn visa and, using a pen from her briefcase, carefully retrieved the pieces. "This is outrageous," Peterson muttered, but made no move to stop her. Taylor, recognizing the situation was spiraling beyond his control, attempted damage control. "Perhaps we've had a misunderstanding. If Miss Williams would like to discuss this privately, there will be no private discussions," Zoe interrupted. "Everything happens in the open now, with witnesses and documentation." She placed the torn visa pieces in a clear document sleeve from her briefcase and showed them to Jasmine. "Is this your visa that was intact before the gate agent tore it?" "Yes," Jasmine confirmed, fighting back tears of relief at finding an advocate. Zoe turned to the security team. "I'd like to speak with your supervisor immediately. And I need to contact the U.S. Embassy emergency line regarding this incident." The mention of contacting the embassy caused visible concern among the airline staff. Peterson's face flushed red, while Taylor began typing frantically on a computer terminal. Zoe guided Jasmine to a nearby seating area, positioning herself between Jasmine and the airline staff. "I was on your flight from Lagos," she explained quietly. "I saw how they singled you out at the gate there too. I'm a civil rights attorney returning from a conference. You're not alone in this." For the first time since the nightmare began, Jasmine felt her panic subsiding. "Thank you," she whispered. "I don't know what I would have done." "Don't thank me yet," Zoe replied, already dialing a number on her phone. "This is just the beginning." The call to the embassy emergency line was initially frustrating. The representative who answered seemed skeptical of the situation, asking repeatedly if Jasmine had perhaps misunderstood what happened. "I need to speak with a senior visa officer immediately," Zoe insisted. An American airline employee has deliberately destroyed a valid U.S. government-issued document. This is not a misunderstanding. After several minutes on hold, Zoe was informed that someone would call back, but no timeframe was provided. Meanwhile, the airport security supervisor had arrived, a woman named Captain Diaz who appeared more concerned with de-escalating the situation than determining fault. "We can move to a private office to sort this out," Captain Diaz suggested. "With respect, Captain, privacy at this point works against my client," Zoe replied. "The public nature of what happened is important to document." As they waited, Jasmine called her parents, her hands shaking as she dialed. When her mother answered, Jasmine couldn't hold back her tears. "Mama, something terrible has happened," she began, explaining the situation as her parents listened in horror. "We will fly there immediately," her father declared in the background. "No, Papa, wait," Jasmine cautioned, knowing how difficult it would be for them to get emergency visas. "There's a lawyer helping me. Let me see what happens first." As she ended the call with her devastated parents, Jasmine's phone lit up with an unknown number. She looked at Zoe questioningly. "Answer it," Zoe encouraged. "Could be the embassy." Jasmine accepted the call, putting it on speaker. "Hello. Miss Williams? This is Dr. Anthony Washington, Senior Consular Officer at the U.S. Embassy. I understand there's been an incident with your student visa at JFK." Zoe and Jasmine exchanged shocked glances. They hadn't expected a senior official to respond so quickly. "Yes, sir," Jasmine replied, her voice gaining strength. "The gate agent tore it in half, claiming it was fraudulent." "I've been briefed on the situation," Dr. Washington replied, his voice carrying unmistakable authority. "And I want you to know that we're taking this very seriously. Your visa was valid and properly issued. I've personally verified it in our system." Peterson and Taylor, who had been hovering nearby trying to overhear, both visibly paled. "Can you put me on speaker so everyone present can hear?" Dr. Washington requested. Jasmine complied, holding the phone out as Dr. Washington continued. "This is Dr. Anthony Washington, Senior Consular Officer for the U.S. Department of State. I want to be absolutely clear, Jasmine Williams holds a legitimate student visa properly issued by our Lagos Embassy. Any suggestion otherwise is incorrect. Furthermore, the destruction of a U.S. government document by non-authorized personnel is a serious matter that will be fully investigated." The terminal had grown quiet as passengers gathered to witness the dramatic turn of events. Captain Diaz's expression hardened as she turned toward Peterson and Taylor. "Dr. Washington, this is Captain Diaz, JFK Airport Security. How would you like us to proceed?" "I'll be contacting airport management and airline executives directly," Dr. Washington replied. "In the meantime, Miss Williams needs to be accommodated on the next flight to Boston with appropriate compensation for this inexcusable treatment. And I want the names of all airline personnel involved." As Dr. Washington continued speaking, Jasmine caught Peterson's eye. The smirk was long gone, replaced by the dawning realization that his actions would have consequences he hadn't anticipated. Zoe squeezed Jasmine's hand supportively as Dr. Washington concluded the call with a promise, "Miss Williams, we will make this right. And we will ensure this doesn't happen to anyone else." As Jasmine ended the call, she felt a strange mixture of vindication and exhaustion. The journey was far from over, but for the first time since Peterson had torn her visa, she allowed herself to believe that her Harvard dream might still be possible. "What happens now?" she asked Zoe quietly. "Now," Zoe replied with a determined smile, "we make sure they're held accountable. Every single one of them." Dr. Anthony Washington wasn't someone who typically handled individual visa cases. As a senior consular officer with 27 years of diplomatic experience, his responsibilities usually involved policy decisions and international negotiations. But something about Jasmine Williams' situation had caught his attention. "Pull up the Lagos visa issuance records for the past month," he instructed his assistant from his office in Washington, D.C. And get me on a conference call with JFK Airport management and the airline executives. Priority level, immediate. While waiting for the call to be arranged, Dr. Washington reviewed Jasmine's file on his computer screen. Perfect academic record. Multiple published research papers. Glowing recommendations from internationally recognized scientists. A 5-year plan that included returning to Nigeria to establish medical services in underserved communities. Exactly the kind of student we should be welcoming, he muttered. But what truly concerned him was the note he had found buried in the system. This wasn't the first complaint about Harold Peterson. 3 previous incidents involving African and Middle Eastern students had been reported in the past year alone, though none had escalated to the point of document destruction. The conference call connected with a series of electronic tones. On the line were Bradley Thompson, Airport Operations Director for JFK, Victoria Winters, Executive Vice President for Customer Experience at Atlantic Airlines, and their respective legal counsel. "Thank you all for joining on such short notice," Dr. Washington began, his deep voice carrying the weight of federal authority. "We have a situation that requires immediate resolution." Dr. Washington, if this is about the Nigerian student, we're already addressing it internally, Victoria Winters interjected before he could continue. "There seems to have been a misunderstanding, Ms. Winters." With respect, Dr. Washington interrupted firmly, what happened to Jasmine Williams was not a misunderstanding. It was, at minimum, gross misconduct and potentially a violation of federal law. The silence on the other end of the line spoke volumes. Your employee, Harold Peterson, destroyed a valid U.S. government document. He publicly humiliated a student who had every right to travel. And based on our records, this is not the first incident involving Mr. Peterson and travelers from African nations. Bradley Thompson cleared his throat. Dr. Washington, we take these allegations very seriously. Airport security has already begun an investigation. This goes beyond an internal investigation, Dr. Washington stated. The State Department will be filing a formal complaint. But more immediately, I want to ensure Ms. Williams reaches her destination today, with appropriate compensation, and that Mr. Peterson and anyone who enabled his behavior are removed from positions where they can discriminate against other travelers. Victoria Winters' tone shifted to damage control mode. We sincerely regret this incident and will certainly accommodate Ms. Williams on our next flight to Boston with our compliments. As for Mr. Peterson, he'll be placed on administrative leave while we investigate. That's insufficient, Dr. Washington replied. I've reviewed the witness statements and video evidence already circulating on social media. The hashtag Justice for Jasmine is trending nationally. This isn't a situation where slow administrative processes will suffice. As if on cue, Dr. Washington's assistant handed him a tablet showing Twitter feeds. Videos from multiple angles showed Peterson tearing the visa while smirking, followed by security surrounding Jasmine as if she were the offender. I'm looking at footage that clearly shows intentional destruction of a federal document, followed by what appears to be racially motivated security targeting, Dr. Washington continued. This isn't just about one student's inconvenience. This is about a pattern of behavior that damages international relations and violates civil rights laws. The legal counsel for Atlantic Airlines finally spoke up. Dr. Washington, we appreciate your concern, but we need to follow our established protocols for employee. Your protocols allowed this to happen, Dr. Washington interrupted. And while you're following protocols, Harvard University is calling my office asking why one of their incoming medical students is being prevented from reaching campus. The Nigerian embassy is inquiring about potential discrimination against their citizens. And the media is requesting statements. The mention of media attention created another telling silence. I've arranged for a new visa to be issued to Miss Williams immediately, Dr. Washington added. A consular officer is already en route to JFK with the documentation. I expect your full cooperation in ensuring she reaches Boston today. After the call ended, Dr. Washington sat back in his chair, thinking about the bigger picture. Jasmine Williams was exceptional. With resources and now powerful advocates. But how many other students had faced similar discrimination without the benefit of a Zoe Patterson happening to witness it, or a senior embassy official taking personal interest? Meanwhile, at JFK, the situation had evolved dramatically. Airport management had arrived at the gate area, now speaking with Zoe and Jasmine. The torn visa remained safely preserved in Zoe's document sleeve as evidence. And fellow passengers who had witnessed the incident were sharing their videos online, causing the story to spread rapidly. Atlantic Airlines' social media team was in crisis mode as mentions of #JusticeForJasmine multiplied by the minute. Comments ranged from people sharing their own experiences of discrimination while traveling to calls for Peterson's termination and airline boycotts. Have you ever experienced discrimination when traveling? Comment number 1: if you believe gate agents should receive better cultural sensitivity training. Comment number 2: if you think Harold Peterson should be fired immediately. What would you have done if you witnessed what happened to Jasmine? Hit that like button if you believe we need stronger protections for international students, and subscribe for more stories about fighting injustice. The airline's initial public statement, characterizing the incident as a misunderstanding about documentation requirements, only fueled the outrage as it contradicted the video evidence clearly showing Peterson's deliberate actions. Harvard University's Dean of Admissions had issued a statement confirming Jasmine's status as an incoming student. Harvard Medical School welcomes Jasmine Williams, an exceptional scholar whose research has already contributed to the field of immunology. We are disturbed by reports of her treatment at JFK and are working with federal authorities to ensure her safe arrival. Peterson and Taylor had been summoned to an emergency meeting with airline management, their faces grim as they were escorted to an administrative office away from public view. "This is ridiculous," Peterson muttered to Taylor as they walked. "We were just doing our jobs. How were we supposed to know the embassy would get involved?" "Stop talking," Taylor hissed back. "Everything we say right now could be used against us." While they faced the beginning of what would likely be career-ending disciplinary proceedings, Jasmine sat with Zoe in the airport's premium lounge, where she had been moved by apologetic airline staff. A constant stream of officials came to express regret for her experience, each one carefully avoiding any admission of legal liability while offering various forms of compensation. "Miss Williams, we've arranged for you to fly first class to Boston," announced a senior customer service manager. "And we'd like to offer you flight vouchers for future travel." "That's thoughtful," Zoe replied before Jasmine could respond. "But inadequate given the circumstances. We'll be documenting all damages, including emotional distress and potential academic impacts from this delay." Jasmine's phone rang again, this time, a call from Harvard's Dean of Students, Dr. Lydia Montgomery. "Jasmine, we've been informed about what happened," Dr. Montgomery said warmly. "I want you to know that we're here to support you. Your orientation materials will be waiting whenever you arrive, and we've arranged for a student advisor to meet you at Logan Airport." As Jasmine expressed her gratitude, a State Department official arrived at the lounge, carrying a diplomatic pouch. "Miss Williams. I'm Daniel Alvarez from the U.S. Consular Services," he introduced himself, presenting credentials. "Dr. Washington sent me personally to deliver your new visa and ensure you board your flight without further incident." The replacement visa, expedited through diplomatic channels, was placed in Jasmine's passport with meticulous care. This small document, a simple piece of paper with security features, represented the restoration of her future. "The embassy will be following up regarding the incident," Alvarez assured her. "Dr. Washington has taken a personal interest in your case." As preparations were made for Jasmine's departure to Boston, news cameras had gathered outside the terminal, alerted by the viral social media storm. Atlantic Airlines executives, recognizing the escalating PR crisis, had dispatched their chief diversity officer to the airport to make a public statement. "We'll handle the media," Zoe promised Jasmine. "You focus on getting to Harvard and beginning your studies." "That's the best response to what happened here, succeeding brilliantly despite their attempts to stop you." Jasmine nodded, exhausted but resolute. "I never expected my American journey to begin like this. Unfortunately, this is America too, Zoe replied quietly. The struggle against those who would deny your humanity and your achievements based on your skin color and your birthplace. But so is this, people coming together to fight injustice when they witness it. As Jasmine prepared to board her flight to Boston, now upgraded to first class with an airline representative assigned specifically to ensure her comfort, she thought about how quickly life could change. 6 hours ago, she had been full of uncomplicated hope about her future at Harvard. Now she understood that her journey would involve fighting for her place in ways her white classmates would never have to experience. But she also recognized something else: she wasn't fighting alone. What would you do if faced with blatant discrimination? Would you have the courage to stand up like Zoe did? The embassy's swift response showed the power of accountability, but how many others face similar treatment without powerful advocates? Let's continue this important conversation in the next part of Jasmine's story. The luxury of first class couldn't mask the reality of Jasmine's situation. As the plane cruised toward Boston, she sat rigidly in her wide leather seat, unable to enjoy the amenities that surrounded her. The flight attendant had brought champagne, gourmet snacks, and offered a hot towel, all met with polite but distant acknowledgement from Jasmine. "Is there anything else I can get you, Miss Williams?" The attendant asked, her solicitousness tinged with the awkwardness of someone who knew exactly why this young woman had been upgraded. "No, thank you," Jasmine replied automatically. Her mind was elsewhere, replaying Peterson's smirk as he tore her visa, the security guards surrounding her, the public humiliation. Each memory sent fresh waves of anxiety through her body. Her phone had been buzzing constantly with notifications. News outlets requesting interviews. Social media tags from strangers expressing outrage or support. Messages from family and friends who had seen the videos now circulating widely online. Even her future Harvard classmates had found her on various platforms, sending messages of solidarity. But amid the digital noise, Jasmine felt profoundly alone. Suspended between continents, between her past life and uncertain future, she existed in a liminal space, physically in transit while emotionally frozen in trauma. The short flight from New York to Boston gave her little time to process what had happened. When the plane touched down at Logan International Airport, Jasmine found herself dreading the moment she would have to walk through another terminal, face another security checkpoint, interact with more uniformed personnel who might view her with suspicion. As promised, a Harvard student advisor named Malik Johnson was waiting at the arrival gate, holding a sign with her name. His warm smile provided the first genuine comfort Jasmine had felt since the incident. "Jasmine, welcome to Boston," he greeted her, offering to take her carry-on bag. "I can't imagine what you've been through today, but you're safe now. We've arranged transportation directly to campus." The drive from the airport to Cambridge passed in a blur. Malik tried to engage her with information about orientation, housing, and student resources, but Jasmine could only offer minimal responses. Her body had begun reacting to the stress, a pounding headache, upset stomach, and trembling hands that she couldn't control. "I think I need to rest," she finally admitted as they approached Harvard's campus. "Of course," Malik replied with understanding. "We've arranged temporary accommodation for you until regular dormitory check-in tomorrow. The Dean of Students wants to meet with you, but only when you're ready." The temporary accommodation turned out to be a private guest suite typically reserved for visiting scholars. Under normal circumstances, Jasmine would have been awed by the elegant furnishings and historic architecture. Now, she barely registered her surroundings as Malik showed her around. "There's food in the refrigerator, and the bathroom has everything you might need," he explained. "Here's my card with my cell number. Call anytime, day or night, if you need anything at all." After Malik left, Jasmine sat on the edge of the bed, finally alone with the full weight of what had happened. The tears came suddenly and violently, deep, body-shaking sobs that released hours of suppressed emotion. She cried for the humiliation she had endured, for the tarnished beginning of her American dream, for the innocence lost in that moment when Peterson had torn her visa with casual cruelty. When the tears finally subsided, Jasmine checked her phone again. Among the notifications was an email from Zoe Patterson. "Jasmine, I wanted to update you on developments at JFK. The story has gained significant traction in national media. Atlantic Airlines has issued a formal apology, attached, and announced that Peterson and Taylor have been placed on administrative leave pending investigation. Corporate speak for we're figuring out how to fire them without legal repercussions. The State Department is pressing for a formal review of all passenger processing protocols. More importantly, how are you doing? I've taken the liberty of contacting colleagues in Boston who specialize in civil rights cases should you wish to pursue legal action. Rest and focus on your studies, but know that options for accountability remain open." Zoe, attached to the email was a PDF of Atlantic Airlines' public statement. Atlantic Airlines deeply regrets the treatment experienced by Harvard Medical School student Jasmine Williams at JFK International Airport. The actions taken by our staff do not reflect our values or service standards. We have placed the employees involved on administrative leave and launched a comprehensive investigation. We are cooperating fully with federal authorities reviewing the incident. Atlantic Airlines is committed to ensuring all passengers are treated with dignity and respect, regardless of national origin, race, or ethnicity. We have reached out to Ms. Williams directly to offer our sincere apologies and appropriate compensation. The carefully worded corporate statement made no explicit admission of racial discrimination, focusing instead on abstract treatment and actions without specificity. The final paragraph mentioned new training initiatives and policy reviews, standard crisis management language that promised change without guaranteeing it. Meanwhile, public reaction continued to intensify. #Justice for Jasmine had been joined by #Boycott Atlantic Airlines and #FlyingWhileBlack. News segments featured interviews with other international students sharing similar experiences. Civil rights organizations issued statements condemning what they described as a pattern of discriminatory treatment toward African travelers. The backlash wasn't limited to Peterson and Taylor. Internet sleuths had uncovered Peterson's social media accounts, revealing a history of problematic posts about immigrants and racial minorities. Screenshots of his comments comparing African nations to corrupt wastelands and questioning the credentials of black professionals circulated widely, adding fuel to the outrage. As evening fell on Jasmine's first day in America, her parents called from Lagos. "We've applied for emergency visas to come support you," her father announced, his voice tight with controlled anger. "Papa, that's not necessary," Jasmine protested, knowing how difficult the process would be and how much it would cost them. "I'm at Harvard now. The situation is being handled." "It is absolutely necessary," her mother interjected firmly. "No one tears up my daughter's visa and makes her cry without answering to me personally." Despite the stress of the day, Jasmine found herself smiling at her mother's protective ferocity. The embassy might not approve emergency visas just for this. "Dar. Washington has assured us they will expedite our application," her father replied, surprising Jasmine. "He called us directly after speaking with you." The thought of her parents navigating international travel to support her both touched and concerned Jasmine. They had never left Nigeria before, and their limited finances were already stretched thin supporting her education. "Let's wait a few days," she suggested. "See how things develop here first." After reluctantly agreeing to her request, her parents extracted a promise that she would call them daily with updates. As the call ended, Jasmine felt the physical and emotional exhaustion of the day overtaking her. Despite the comfortable bed waiting, she knew sleep would be elusive. Her prediction proved accurate. Throughout the night, Jasmine drifted in and out of restless slumber, her dreams filled with hostile faces and tearing paper. Each time she woke, the unfamiliar shadows of the guest suite momentarily disoriented her, bringing fresh waves of anxiety. By morning, news of the incident had spread throughout the Harvard community. Jasmine's phone contained messages from faculty members, student organizations, and the university president, all expressing support and outrage at her treatment. The most surprising call came shortly after breakfast. Dr. Lydia Montgomery, Dean of Students, personally visiting Jasmine's temporary accommodation. "I wanted to check on you in person," Dr. Montgomery explained, her kind face creased with concern. "And to let you know that I've decided to fly to New York today to meet with airline and airport officials." Jasmine blinked in surprise. "You don't need to do that, Dr. Montgomery. I'm here now, an orientation, this goes beyond your individual experience, Jasmine," the dean interrupted gently. "Though that alone would warrant action. This is about ensuring that no other Harvard student, no student at all, faces similar discrimination. Your case has highlighted a systemic problem that requires institutional response." The dean's willingness to take personal action moved Jasmine deeply. "Thank you," she said simply, unable to articulate the full extent of her gratitude. "Additionally," Dr. Montgomery continued, "Atlantic Airlines has contacted us offering a significant settlement. Their legal team has prepared documents for you to sign." Jasmine's expression must have revealed her confusion, as the dean quickly added, "I strongly advise you not to sign anything without legal representation. They're hoping to resolve this quickly and quietly with money." "I don't want their money," Jasmine replied, a spark of her natural determination returning. "I want accountability. I want to make sure Peterson and others like him can't do this to anyone else." Dr. Montgomery nodded approvingly. "That's a principled position, and one I respect. Just know that pursuing accountability through legal channels may be a long and difficult process. Whatever you decide, Harvard stands with you." After the dean left, promising to check in again after her New York meetings, Jasmine found herself at a crossroads. The airline was offering financial compensation, likely substantial, to make the problem go away. Accepting would be the easiest path forward, allowing her to focus entirely on her studies. But something inside her rebelled against this solution. The image of Peterson's satisfied smirk as he tore her visa haunted her. How many other students had he humiliated who didn't have a Zoe Patterson to advocate for them or a Dr. Washington to intervene? Opening her laptop, Jasmine began researching similar cases of discrimination at airports and border crossings. The patterns she discovered were disturbing. Travelers from African, Middle Eastern, and South Asian countries consistently reported higher rates of secondary screening, document verification, and denial of entry compared to European travelers with similar visa types. Most concerning were the stories that never made headlines: students who missed orientation, researchers who missed conferences, families who missed weddings. All due to arbitrary decisions made by individuals with unchecked authority and implicit biases. As Jasmine compiled these accounts, a new sense of purpose began to emerge from the trauma. Perhaps her experience, painful as it was, could serve as a catalyst for meaningful change. Perhaps the attention her case had received could shine light on the countless similar incidents that occurred daily without public outcry. With renewed clarity, Jasmine called Zoe Patterson. "I've been thinking about the airline settlement offer," she began without preamble. "And?" Zoe prompted. "I don't want to sign anything that includes a non-disclosure agreement," Jasmine stated firmly. "This isn't just about me." Zoe's smile was audible in her voice. "I was hoping you'd say that. Because I've been contacted by 3 other students with nearly identical experiences involving Harold Peterson. And I think we have the beginnings of a case that could change airline protocols nationwide." For the first time since Peterson had torn her visa, Jasmine felt something beyond anxiety and outrage. She felt purpose. And with purpose came the strength to transform her individual trauma into collective action. "What's our next step?" she asked, ready to fight back. "The key to winning this case isn't just proving what happened to you," Zoe explained, spreading documents across the conference table in her Boston law firm's office. "It's establishing a pattern of discriminatory behavior that the airline knew about and failed to address." 1 week had passed since the incident at JFK. Jasmine had completed her orientation at Harvard Medical School, meeting professors and classmates who had already seen her face on the news. While many offered support, she couldn't help noticing the subtle ways some people treated her differently, alternating between excessive sympathy and unspoken resentment at the attention her case had received. We've identified 7 other individuals who experienced similar treatment from Peterson over the past 18 months, Zoe continued. 5 from African nations, 2 from the Middle East. All dark-skinned. All questioned about legitimate documentation. None of the white European travelers with identical visa types reported any issues. Jasmine nodded, studying the timeline Zoe had created. And the airline knew. That's where it gets interesting, Zoe replied, sliding forward a stack of papers. Through preliminary discovery, we've obtained internal emails showing that complaints about Peterson were filed with HR at least 4 times. Each was dismissed as a misunderstanding or necessary security precaution. Jasmine picked up one of the email printouts, scanning the corporate language that systematically dismissed serious concerns, while passenger, redacted, perceived Agent Peterson's questioning as intrusive. Our review indicates he was following established security protocols. Cultural differences may have contributed to a perception of bias where none existed. No further action recommended. This is infuriating, Jasmine muttered, setting down the paper. They're blaming the victims for cultural differences instead of addressing obvious discrimination. Exactly, Zoe agreed. And that's why I've decided to take your case pro bono. This isn't just about compensation for one incident, it's about changing how international travelers are treated throughout the industry. The decision to pursue legal action hadn't been easy. Harvard's administration, while supportive of Jasmine personally, had subtly suggested that focusing on her studies might be more productive than engaging in a protracted legal battle. Several professors had reminded her that first-year medical school was challenging enough without additional commitments. Even her parents, despite their initial anger, had expressed concern about her taking on a high-profile lawsuit while adjusting to a new country and demanding academic program. "Are you sure about this, Jasmine?" her father had asked during their nightly video call. "We support you completely, but your education must remain the priority." "This is part of my education, Papa," she had replied with conviction. "The kind that doesn't happen in classrooms." Now, sitting in Zoe's office reviewing evidence, Jasmine felt certain she had made the right decision. The alternative, accepting a settlement and moving on, would have left Peterson and the system that enabled him free to continue discriminating against other students. "The airline's legal team has already made their first aggressive move," Zoe noted, pulling out another document. "They're claiming that as a gate agent, Peterson was exercising discretionary security functions that shield both him and the company from liability. He deliberately destroyed a government document," Jasmine countered, indignation rising in her voice. "How is that a security function?" "It's not," Zoe assured her. "But they'll try every possible defense to avoid setting a precedent. They've also submitted a motion arguing that discrimination claims by non-citizens face a higher burden of proof." The legal maneuvering was just beginning, but already Jasmine could see how the system was designed to exhaust plaintiffs into settlement or abandonment of their claims. The airline had virtually unlimited resources to fight the case, while she was a student living on scholarship funds. "There's something else you should know," Zoe added, her expression growing serious. "The Department of Transportation has launched an official investigation into discriminatory practices at Atlantic Airlines based on our complaint. That's significant because it moves this beyond a civil case into potential regulatory action." This news heartened Jasmine. Government involvement meant broader implications and the possibility of industry-wide reforms. As Jasmine left the law office that afternoon to return to campus for evening study group, her phone buzzed with a news alert. Harold Peterson claims he was just following protocol in visa incident. Opening the article, she found Peterson had hired Gregory Maxwell, a high-profile attorney known for defending controversial clients. Maxwell had issued a statement characterizing Peterson as a dedicated aviation professional with 20 years of unblemished service, who was being scapegoated for following company security directives. The statement continued, Mr. Peterson has never discriminated against any passenger based on race, nationality, or ethnicity. The current media narrative has distorted a routine security procedure into something it was not. We look forward to presenting the full facts in court." Jasmine felt her stomach tighten reading Peterson's absolute denial of responsibility. Even with video evidence and multiple witnesses, he was attempting to rewrite reality, and finding platforms willing to publish his version. That evening, as Jasmine attempted to focus on her immunology coursework, her concentration kept slipping. The legal terminology from her afternoon with Zoe mingled with medical vocabulary, creating a mental fog that left her frustrated and exhausted. Her roommate, Alicia Thompson, a first-year student from Chicago who had been assigned to share Jasmine's dormitory suite, noticed her struggle. "Rough day?" Alicia asked, setting down her own textbook. "Just distracted," Jasmine admitted. "The lawsuit is taking more mental energy than I expected." Alicia nodded thoughtfully. "My mom's an attorney. She always says the legal system is designed to wear people down, not lift them up." "That's exactly how it feels," Jasmine agreed, grateful for the understanding. "You know," Alicia continued hesitantly, "some people are saying you should just take the settlement money and focus on school." "Not me," she added quickly, seeing Jasmine's expression change. "I think what you're doing is important. But I've heard the whispers." The whispers didn't surprise Jasmine. She'd sensed the undercurrents of opinion among certain classmates and faculty. The unspoken suggestion that she was exploiting the incident for attention or financial gain, or that she was unnecessarily dividing the medical school community along racial lines. People who haven't experienced discrimination will never fully understand why fighting it matters, Jasmine replied. "I'm not doing this for money or attention. I'm doing it because the next student who faces someone like Peterson might not have a lawyer sitting nearby or an embassy official willing to intervene." Alicia's expression softened with admiration. "Well, for what it's worth, you've got allies here. More than you might realize." As weeks passed, the legal process inched forward while media interest in Jasmine's story gradually waned. Without new developments to report, news outlets moved on to fresher controversies, leaving Jasmine in the peculiar position of being simultaneously a public figure and forgotten, her name recognized but her ongoing struggle overlooked. The airline, sensing the shift in public attention, intensified pressure for settlement. Their latest offer had doubled, now including a significant monetary sum, guaranteed internship opportunities with their corporate medical team, and lifetime flight benefits. "They're getting desperate," Zoe observed during their regular update meeting. "But they've added new language to the NDA that would prevent you from even acknowledging discrimination occurred. You'd essentially have to adopt their narrative that it was all a misunderstanding." Jasmine shook her head firmly. "Not acceptable." "I agree," Zoe replied. "Especially given what our investigator just uncovered." She slid a thumb drive across the table. "This contains emails between Peterson and 5 other gate agents discussing what they call extra scrutiny for passengers from specific countries. They created an informal quota system for finding documentation issues with travelers from African and Middle Eastern nations." Jasmine stared at the small device containing such damning evidence. "How did you get this?" "Let's just say someone at the airline has a conscience," Zoe answered with a slight smile. "This could be a turning point. It proves the discrimination was systematic, not isolated." As Jasmine absorbed this development, her phone buzzed with a campus notification. The message froze her blood. Her anatomy midterm had been rescheduled to conflict directly with her deposition date in the lawsuit. "This can't be a coincidence," she muttered, showing Zoe the message. "Who controls exam scheduling?" Zoe asked, immediately alert to potential interference. "Professor Barnes is the course director," Jasmine replied. "He's been less than supportive about the lawsuit." Dar. William Barnes was a renowned anatomist whose textbooks were used in medical schools worldwide. He was also notoriously rigid about his course requirements and had made several pointed comments about students who prioritize activism over academics. "I'll call the dean about this," Zoe promised. "If Barnes is deliberately creating academic obstacles because of your lawsuit, that's another legal issue entirely." Later that day, researching Dr. Barnes for her conversation with the dean, Zoe discovered something significant. Before his academic career, Barnes had served on the board of directors for a subsidiary company owned by Atlantic Airlines' parent corporation. The connection was hidden beneath layers of corporate structure, but unmistakable once uncovered. When Jasmine learned of this conflict of interest, pieces began falling into place. Barnes' subtle discouragement, his increasingly critical evaluation of her work, the coincidental exam rescheduling, all pointed to coordinated pressure from multiple directions. "They're trying to force me to choose between my education and justice," Jasmine realized aloud during a late-night study session with Alicia. "If I drop the lawsuit, suddenly all these academic issues will probably disappear." "That's seriously messed up," Alicia replied, indignation clear in her voice. "Have you told Zoe about all of this?" "She's documenting everything," Jasmine confirmed. "But proving it is another matter." As Jasmine struggled with these mounting pressures, an unexpected lifeline appeared. Late one evening, her phone rang with an unknown number. "Is this Jasmine Williams?" a nervous voice asked when she answered. "Yes, who's calling?" "My name isn't important," the caller replied. "What matters is that I work for Atlantic Airlines Corporate Security. And I have information about your case that will change everything." Jasmine sat up straight, immediately alert. "What kind of information?" Peterson wasn't acting alone or on personal bias, the caller continued, speaking rapidly as if afraid of being overheard. "There was a company-wide program called Enhanced Document Verification that specifically targeted passengers from certain countries. It wasn't about security. It was about reducing immigration numbers through intimidation and denial. Do you have proof of this?" Jasmine asked, heart racing. "Yes. Training materials, internal memos, performance metrics tracking successful interventions, which meant preventing people from traveling. Peterson was just following a playbook developed by executives." "Why are you telling me this?" Jasmine questioned, simultaneously hopeful and suspicious. The caller paused before answering. "Because my daughter wants to study medicine abroad next year. And I couldn't live with myself knowing I protected a system that might someday treat her the way you were treated." After arranging a secure method to transfer the documents, the call ended, leaving Jasmine staring at her phone in disbelief. If the caller was legitimate and the documents authentic, this wouldn't just win her case, it would expose a corporate conspiracy that had affected thousands of travelers. With renewed determination, Jasmine returned to her studies, preparing for Barnes' rescheduled exam while Zoe's team verified the whistleblower's information. The dual challenges of first-year medical school and a landmark discrimination lawsuit would have broken many students, but Jasmine drew strength from her purpose. "They thought tearing my visa would be the end of my journey," she told Alicia one evening. Instead, it was just the beginning of something much bigger than Harvard Medical School. The next morning, Zoe called with confirmation, the whistleblower's documents were authentic. The legal battle was about to enter an entirely new phase, one that would expand far beyond a single incident at JFK to expose systematic discrimination across the entire airline industry. "Get ready," Zoe advised. "Things are about to get very interesting." Autumn in Cambridge painted Harvard's campus in brilliant hues of red and gold as Jasmine finally settled into the rhythm of medical school. 6 weeks after her scheduled start date, she had moved from temporary housing into her permanent dormitory, completed orientation requirements, and begun catching up on missed coursework. The delay had created significant academic challenges. While most first-year students were adjusting gradually to the intensive curriculum, Jasmine was forced to absorb 6 weeks of material while simultaneously keeping pace with current lectures and labs. "All right everyone, open your cadavers to the thoracic cavity," Dr. Barnes instructed during anatomy lab, his voice carrying the clipped precision of someone who considered teaching a necessary burden rather than a calling. Today we're identifying structures of the heart and great vessels. Jasmine worked methodically alongside her lab partners, 3 other first-year students assigned to the same cadaver. 2 of them, Michael Goldstein and Kira Patel, had been consistently supportive, sharing notes from sessions she'd missed and staying late to help her catch up. The third, Thomas Whitaker, maintained a polite but distant attitude that occasionally slipped into thinly veiled resentment. "Must be nice to have private tutorials with the professors," Thomas muttered as Dr. Barnes approached their table. "Some of us just have to learn the material on our own." The comment referenced the supplemental sessions Jasmine had been assigned to compensate for her delayed start, sessions mandated by the dean over Barnes' objection that they constituted preferential treatment. Dr. Barnes examined their dissection work with critical eyes. "Ms. Williams, identify this structure," he demanded, pointing to a vessel they had just exposed. "Brachiocephalic trunk, arising from the aortic arch," Jasmine answered confidently. Barnes' expression tightened almost imperceptibly. "And its clinical significance?" "It's the first major branch of the aortic arch, supplying blood to the right arm, neck, and head," Jasmine continued. "Occlusion can cause right-sided neurological symptoms including transient ischemic attacks." Finding no fault with her answer, Barnes moved to the next table without acknowledgement. Once he was out of earshot, Kira squeezed Jasmine's arm supportively. "He's been targeting you with the hardest questions for weeks," she whispered. "And you keep nailing them." Jasmine appreciated the solidarity but remained focused on her work. She couldn't afford any academic slips that might validate the whispers suggesting she was too distracted by her lawsuit to succeed in medical school. After lab concluded, Jasmine headed to the student center where the Black Student Association was hosting a welcome reception. Despite her busy schedule, she had made connecting with this community a priority, recognizing her need for spaces where she didn't have to explain or justify her experiences. "There she is," called out Malik Johnson, the same advisor who had met her at the airport and who served as BSA's graduate student liaison. "Everyone, this is Jasmine Williams." The 24 students gathered in the room applauded warmly. Some had already reached out individually, but many were meeting her for the first time. "We've been following your case closely," said Desiree Jackson, the BSA president and third-year medical student. "What you're doing is important for all of us." "I'm just trying to hold people accountable," Jasmine replied modestly. "That's exactly why it matters," Desiree continued. "Every time one of us accepts discrimination as just how things are, the system wins. You're showing that we can fight back." The gathering provided Jasmine with something she had desperately needed, community with people who understood her experience without explanation. For 2 hours, she relaxed in conversations that didn't revolve around her lawsuit or academic challenges. Discussing music, food, hometown memories, and the universal medical student complaints about sleep deprivation and caffeine dependency. As the event wound down, Malik pulled Jasmine aside. "The BSA wants to formally support your legal case. We've started a fund to help with any expenses not covered by your lawyer's pro bono arrangement." Tears welled in Jasmine's eyes at this unexpected support. "That's incredibly generous, but, no buts," Malik interrupted gently. "This fight belongs to all of us. Let us help carry it with you." Walking back to her dormitory that evening, Jasmine felt a renewed sense of belonging that had been missing since her arrival. The path ahead remained challenging, but she no longer felt alone on the journey. The following morning brought another challenging interaction with Dr. Barnes. He had scheduled a private meeting to discuss her progress, a seemingly routine academic check-in that Jasmine suspected had ulterior motives. "Miss Williams," Barnes began from behind his imposing desk, "while your technical knowledge appears adequate, I have concerns about your focus and commitment to the program." Jasmine maintained a neutral expression despite her internal alarm. "I've completed all makeup assignments and am current with all coursework requirements, Dr. Barnes." "Academics aren't solely about completing assignments," he countered. Medical training requires total dedication. Your extracurricular activities, particularly this legal matter, appear to be consuming significant mental and emotional resources that should be directed toward your studies. The implication was clear: drop the lawsuit or face academic consequences. With respect, Dr. Barnes, Jasmine replied carefully, my academic performance speaks for itself. My test scores and lab evaluations are all above the class median despite my delayed start. Barnes leaned forward, abandoning pretense. Harvard Medical School has relationships with many corporate partners, including in the transportation sector. These relationships fund research, provide internship opportunities, and support our endowment. Your lawsuit potentially jeopardizes these partnerships. The naked truth of his concern, money and institutional relationships rather than her education, momentarily stunned Jasmine into silence. Are you suggesting I should abandon a legitimate discrimination claim because it might inconvenience Harvard's corporate donors? She finally asked. I'm suggesting you consider your priorities, Barnes replied coldly. You're here on scholarship. That support can be re-evaluated based on professional conduct standards. The threat was thinly veiled but unmistakable. As Jasmine left Barnes' office, she immediately called Zoe to report the conversation. He directly threatened your scholarship? Zoe asked, incredulity and anger evident in her voice. That's textbook intimidation and potentially violates several university policies. He was careful with his wording, Jasmine clarified. But the message was clear: drop the lawsuit or face academic repercussions. This connects directly to what we discovered about his past board position, Zoe noted. We need to bring this to the dean immediately. The meeting with Dean Montgomery was scheduled for the following day. Meanwhile, Jasmine faced another challenge, a group project presentation where she had been paired with Thomas Whitaker and 2 other students to analyze a complex medical case. Despite her contributions representing the majority of the research and analysis, Thomas had subtly positioned himself as the group leader during preparation sessions. Now, as they presented to the class, he repeatedly interrupted or clarified Jasmine's points, undermining her authority on the material. When question time arrived, a classmate directed a challenging query to Jasmine about a statistical analysis in their presentation. Before she could respond, Thomas jumped in. What Jasmine probably meant to reference was. He began, proceeding to give an explanation that contradicted her carefully researched analysis. Actually, Jasmine interjected firmly, our data shows the opposite conclusion. She proceeded to deliver a brilliantly clear explanation that drew on recent research published in the New England Journal of Medicine, research she had spent extra hours reviewing while catching up on missed material. The professor nodded approvingly. Excellent analysis, Ms. Williams. That's precisely the kind of evidence-based thinking we need in clinical practice. Thomas's face flushed with embarrassment at being publicly corrected. After class, he approached Jasmine with barely contained anger. You made me look stupid in front of everyone, he accused. I corrected an inaccurate statement about our project, Jasmine replied evenly. The same way you've been correcting me throughout this entire process. Some of us earned our place here the traditional way, Thomas shot back, his voice low but intense. Without lawsuits and media attention and special accommodations. The implication that she hadn't earned her position struck at Jasmine's deepest insecurities. For a moment, she considered responding with the evidence of her academic achievements, the published research, the perfect GPA, the competitive examinations she had excelled in while working part-time to support her family. Instead, she simply said, my work speaks for itself, Thomas. As does yours. Walking away from the confrontation, Jasmine felt the familiar exhaustion of battling discrimination on multiple fronts simultaneously. From Peterson to Barnes to classmates like Thomas, the message was consistent: prove you belong here, again and again and again. That evening, returning to her dormitory after another late study session, Jasmine found Alicia waiting up for her with unexpected news. Someone's been asking questions about you around campus, Alicia reported, concern evident in her voice. A man claiming to be a journalist, but without proper credentials. Campus security escorted him out this afternoon. Did they get his name? Jasmine asked, immediately alert to potential connections to her case. Security wouldn't tell me details, but one of the guards mentioned he had airline magazines in his bag, Alicia replied. Seems like a strange coincidence. The implication was disturbing. Atlantic Airlines might be investigating her personally, looking for information to discredit her character or academic standing. The escalation suggested they viewed her case as a serious threat, more serious perhaps than even Zoe had initially believed. Later that night, unable to sleep despite physical exhaustion, Jasmine's phone rang with an unknown number. Hesitating briefly, she answered. Jasmine Williams, asked an unfamiliar male voice. Who's calling? She responded cautiously. My name is David Chen. I work in Atlantic Airlines' IT security department, the caller explained. We haven't met, but I'm the one who sent you the internal documents about the enhanced document verification program. Jasmine sat upright in bed, immediately alert. The whistleblower. Yes, Chen confirmed. I'm calling because there's something else you need to know. The airline isn't just fighting your lawsuit through legal channels. They've hired private investigators to dig into your background, your social media, your academic history, anything they might use to discredit you publicly. That explains the fake journalist on campus today, Jasmine realized aloud. Exactly, Chen agreed. But there's more. They're specifically looking for any academic issues they might exploit. And based on internal communications I've seen, they believe they have an ally within Harvard providing information. Dar. Barnes, Jasmine whispered, the pieces connecting. I don't have names, Chen continued, but someone with access to student records is definitely cooperating with them. Watch your back, Jasmine. And check your academic records regularly for any unauthorized changes. After thanking Chen for the warning, Jasmine ended the call with a new understanding of the forces aligned against her. This wasn't just about one discriminatory incident anymore. It had evolved into a coordinated effort to protect a system by discrediting the person who threatened to expose it. The realization should have intimidated her. Instead, it strengthened her resolve. If Atlantic Airlines was willing to go to such lengths, the whistleblower's documents must be even more damaging than initially apparent. Tomorrow's meeting with Dean Montgomery had taken on new urgency. What had begun as a complaint about Barnes' inappropriate pressure now represented something much larger, a corporate attempt to manipulate academic institutions to shield themselves from accountability. As dawn broke over Harvard's campus, Jasmine prepared for what would be a pivotal day in both her education and her fight for justice. The path forward was clear. If difficult, she would not be intimidated into silence, regardless of how powerful the interests aligned against her proved to be. What you're describing goes well beyond academic intimidation, Dean Montgomery stated, her normally composed features hardening as Jasmine and Zoe detailed Dr. Barnes' threats and the evidence of his connections to Atlantic Airlines. It potentially constitutes a serious breach of Harvard's ethical standards and conflict of interest policies. The morning meeting in the dean's office had begun as a discussion of Barnes' inappropriate pressure but quickly expanded to include the whistleblower's warnings about corporate investigators and academic sabotage. We have reason to believe Dr. Barnes may be sharing Jasmine's academic information with the airline's legal team, Zoe explained. Potentially in violation of FERPA and numerous university privacy policies. Dean Montgomery's assistant entered with a tablet, discreetly showing her something that caused the dean's expression to darken further. I've just been informed that someone accessed Jasmine's academic records at 2:17 this morning using Dr. Barnes' credentials, she announced. The access occurred from an IP address not associated with our campus network. Jasmine and Zoe exchanged alarmed glances. The violation was even more immediate than they had suspected. I'm placing Dr. Barnes on administrative leave effective immediately pending investigation, the dean continued, pressing a button on her desk phone. And I'm authorizing a comprehensive security audit of all academic systems Jasmine's records are stored in. As the dean made arrangements for Barnes' temporary replacement, Jasmine's phone buzzed with a text from David Chen, "Check your email." Sent final piece of the puzzle. Excusing herself briefly, Jasmine stepped into the hallway to review the message. Chen had forwarded an internal Atlantic Airlines document so explosive that she momentarily forgot to breathe, a comprehensive training manual titled, "Enhanced Document Verification, Demographic Targeting Protocols." The 60-page document outlined specific instructions for identifying high-risk travelers, based primarily on nationality, race, and religion. It included quotas for document rejection rates from specific countries and performance metrics that rewarded gate agents for preventing certain passengers from traveling, with Harold Peterson listed as a top performer for 3 consecutive quarters. Most damning was the section detailing intervention techniques, which explicitly instructed agents to find technical flaws in legitimate documentation when necessary to meet demographic targets. The manual included Peterson's tactic: physically damaging visas and claiming they were forged, as a recommended advanced intervention for resistant travelers. This wasn't just discrimination by rogue employees. It was systematic corporate policy disguised as security protocol. Jasmine returned to the dean's office, showing the document to Zoe, whose eyes widened as she scrolled through the contents. "This changes everything," Zoe whispered. "This isn't just about your incident anymore. This is evidence of a company-wide discriminatory program affecting thousands of travelers." When they explained the new evidence to Dean Montgomery, she immediately grasped the implications. "The university needs to take a formal position on this. I'll convene an emergency meeting with the president and general counsel this afternoon." For Jasmine, the academic threat from Barnes had been neutralized, but the larger battle was entering a critical phase. Leaving the administration building after their meeting, she found a group of BSA members waiting supportively. "We heard about Barnes being suspended," Malik explained. "Word travels fast around here. This goes so much deeper than just Barnes," Jasmine told them, explaining Chen's revelations about the systematic discrimination program while carefully protecting his identity. Desiree shook her head in disgust. "So they weren't just targeting you at the airport. They've been targeting all of us." "Yes," Jasmine confirmed. "And we can prove it now." The next 48 hours brought dramatic developments. The Department of Transportation, presented with Chen's whistleblower evidence, expanded their investigation to include all major U.S. airlines, suspecting the Enhanced Document Verification program might extend beyond Atlantic Airlines alone. Meanwhile, Atlantic Airlines' crisis management strategy shifted dramatically. Having realized their exposure went far beyond a single incident, they terminated both Peterson and Taylor with a public statement distancing the company from their unauthorized actions, directly contradicting the training manual that had instructed those very behaviors. "They're throwing Peterson under the bus to save themselves," Zoe observed during a strategy session with her legal team. "But the documentation proves these weren't rogue employees. This was corporate policy." Most surprising was the news that Peterson and Taylor had already secured positions with another carrier, SkyRoute Airways, suggesting industry networks were protecting those who implemented discriminatory practices even as Atlantic Airlines publicly disavowed them. "The system protects itself," Jasmine noted grimly when she learned of their new employment. On campus, the removal of Dr. Barnes created ripple effects throughout the medical school. Students in his anatomy course reported immediate improvements in classroom atmosphere, particularly for international and minority students who had previously felt targeted by his questioning. An interim investigation revealed Barnes had accessed records for 17 students of color over the past year, forwarding information to external email addresses connected to Atlantic Airlines' legal department. Harvard's president issued a public statement condemning these actions and announcing a comprehensive review of all corporate relationships to identify conflicts of interest. For Jasmine, these developments validated her decision to fight rather than settle. But the academic consequences of the situation continued to challenge her. Despite Barnes' removal, she still faced a demanding curriculum and the ongoing stress of high-profile legal proceedings. "How are you managing all this?" Alicia asked one evening, finding Jasmine still studying at 3 in the morning. "1 hour at a time," Jasmine replied with a tired smile. "And lots of coffee." The true turning point came unexpectedly. After weeks of visa delays and bureaucratic obstacles, Jasmine's parents finally received emergency approval to visit her in America. When she met them at Logan Airport, the emotional reunion overwhelmed all three. "My strong, brave daughter," her mother whispered, holding Jasmine's face between her hands as tears streamed down her cheeks. "Fighting giants and studying medicine at the same time." Her father, normally reserved, embraced her with uncharacteristic emotion. "When I saw that man tear your visa on the news video, I wanted to fly there immediately," he admitted. "But now I see you didn't need rescuing. You became the rescuer for others." Having her parents physically present, seeing her dorm room, meeting her friends, walking Harvard's campus, transformed something in Jasmine. Their pride in her accomplishments and their unwavering support renewed her sense of purpose beyond the lawsuit. During their visit, Zoe called with momentous news. The lawsuit was being elevated to federal court as a class action, with 27 additional plaintiffs from 12 countries joining Jasmine's case against Atlantic Airlines. "The judge granted our motion for expanded discovery," Zoe explained excitedly. "We now have access to their entire internal communications about the targeting program going back 5 years. Even more significant was an invitation for Jasmine to testify before a congressional subcommittee on discrimination in the transportation industry. Her individual experience would help shape potential legislation to prevent similar abuses nationwide. Your voice will be part of changing the system, Zoe told her. This is exactly what you hoped for when you refused to settle. The congressional hearing was scheduled for the following month in Washington, D.C., giving Jasmine time to prepare her testimony while continuing her studies. Harvard's administration, recognizing the historic importance of her participation, arranged academic accommodations to ensure she could fulfill both commitments without penalty. As Jasmine worked with Zoe to draft her testimony, she reflected on how far she had come from that traumatic moment at JFK. What Peterson had intended as an act of humiliation and exclusion had instead become a catalyst for systemic change and personal growth. Sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is refuse to be silenced, she told the BSA members who had gathered to help her prepare for the hearing. Even when everything and everyone is telling you to just take the money and move on. The journey ahead remained challenging, but Jasmine now moved forward with renewed confidence and an expanded purpose. Her fight had evolved from personal vindication to a movement for justice that would potentially protect thousands of future travelers from the discrimination she had faced. As her father had said before returning to Nigeria, they thought tearing your visa would diminish you. Instead, it has magnified your voice in ways they never imagined. Have you ever stood up against injustice despite pressure to stay silent? Would you have had the courage to fight a system as powerful as what Jasmine faced? The final resolution of this remarkable story awaits in our concluding chapter. The congressional hearing room hummed with anticipation. News cameras lined the back wall, their lenses focused on the witness table where Jasmine sat, poised and prepared despite her racing heart. Behind her, filling several rows of public seating, were supporters wearing #JusticeForJasmine buttons, Harvard classmates, BSA members, other plaintiffs in the class action, and civil rights advocates who had rallied to her cause. The Subcommittee on Transportation Equity will now hear testimony from Jasmine Williams, Harvard Medical School student and lead plaintiff in Williams v. Atlantic Airlines, announced Congresswoman Eleanor Richardson, the subcommittee chair. Ms. Williams, you may begin your statement. Taking a deep breath, Jasmine leaned toward the microphone. Thank you, Chairwoman Richardson and distinguished members of the subcommittee. My name is Jasmine Williams, and 8 months ago, an airline employee deliberately tore my valid student visa in half, claiming it was fraudulent based on nothing but the color of my skin and my country of origin. For the next 15 minutes, Jasmine detailed her experience with remarkable composure, explaining not just what had happened to her but the broader pattern revealed by the whistleblower documents. She described how Atlantic Airlines had systematically trained employees to target travelers from specific countries and how the Enhanced Document Verification program established quotas for preventing certain demographics from traveling. This was never about security, she testified. It was about implementing unofficial immigration policy through corporate discrimination, creating barriers for people who had already been legally approved to enter the United States. The questioning from committee members revealed the bipartisan outrage her testimony had generated. Even representatives typically focused on security concerns expressed dismay at the deliberate targeting of legal visa holders based on nationality and race. Ms. Williams asked Congressman James Thornton, "In your opinion, what legislative changes would prevent this type of discrimination in the future?" "3 specific reforms are essential," Jasmine replied without hesitation. First, airlines must be prohibited from implementing any passenger screening programs not explicitly approved by federal authorities. Second, comprehensive anti-discrimination training should be mandatory for all gate agents, with clear penalties for violations. And third, we need an independent oversight body where travelers can report discrimination with the assurance of proper investigation. As the hearing concluded, Jasmine's testimony had accomplished what months of media coverage could not: concrete movement toward legislative action. The subcommittee announced its intention to draft the Transportation Equity and Accountability Act, incorporating many of her recommendations. Outside the hearing room, Zoe greeted Jasmine with a proud embrace. "You were magnificent," she said. "But I have even bigger news. The airline wants to meet for settlement discussions again, and this time, they're not asking for an NDA. They're offering systematic changes along with compensation." The dramatic shift in Atlantic Airlines' position stemmed from multiple factors: the expanded federal investigation, the damaging whistleblower evidence, the class action lawsuit now including nearly 50 plaintiffs, and the legislative momentum following Jasmine's testimony. Most significant was the corporate board's realization that their legal position had become untenable, with potential damages now estimated in the hundreds of millions. 2 weeks later, the landmark settlement was announced. Atlantic Airlines agreed to establish a $175 million compensation fund for victims of discrimination, completely restructure their security training with anti-bias protocols, create an independent oversight committee with civil rights representatives, implement a transparent complaint process with quarterly public reporting, fund scholarships for international students from underrepresented countries, submit to 5 years of monitoring by the Department of Transportation. Most importantly for Jasmine, the settlement explicitly acknowledged the discrimination that had occurred rather than disguising it as a misunderstanding or isolated incident. "This isn't just about money," she explained during a press conference announcing the settlement. "It's about accountability and systemic change. No settlement could undo what happened, but this agreement helps ensure it won't happen to others." The legal victory came with another significant development. Harold Peterson and Brandon Taylor, despite Atlantic Airlines' attempts to shield them as employees, just following protocol, were held personally liable for their actions. The court rejected their claim of qualified immunity, establishing an important precedent that airline employees could be individually responsible for discriminatory conduct. Peterson, once confident in his power to destroy dreams with impunity, now faced significant financial penalties and the end of his aviation career. SkyRoute Airways terminated his new position immediately after the ruling, unwilling to associate with the liability he represented. For Jasmine, these external victories were matched by personal and academic achievements. Despite the extraordinary demands on her time, she had maintained excellent academic standing, even earning the highest score in her class on the anatomy final examination previously overseen by Dr. Barnes. Harvard's investigation into Barnes had revealed extensive misconduct beyond his targeting of Jasmine. Multiple students of color had experienced similar treatment, their academic records manipulated and their accomplishments questioned without basis. The tenured professor ultimately resigned under pressure from alumni and donors outraged by his abuse of position. As the one-year anniversary of the JFK incident approached, Jasmine established the Williams Foundation for Educational Equity, using a portion of her settlement to create resources for international students facing discrimination. The foundation provided emergency legal assistance, temporary housing, and advocacy services for students whose educational journeys were threatened by systemic barriers. "Education transformed my life and opens doors for students from backgrounds like mine every day," Jasmine explained at the foundation's launch. "But those doors remain vulnerable to individuals and systems that believe certain people don't belong in certain spaces. Our mission is to ensure those doors remain permanently open for everyone with the talent and determination to walk through them." The foundation quickly partnered with major universities nationwide, including Harvard, which established new protocols to prevent conflicts of interest like those that had enabled Barnes' misconduct. These institutional changes represented perhaps the most enduring impact of Jasmine's fight, structural reforms that would protect future generations of students. Meanwhile, the U.S. Embassy in Lagos implemented new visa protection protocols named the Williams Process, after Jasmine's case. The reforms included enhanced document security, explicit anti-discrimination training for consular officials, and expedited assistance for students facing travel difficulties. Dr. Anthony Washington, the embassy official who had initially intervened on Jasmine's behalf, personally oversaw the implementation of these changes. "What happened to Jasmine Williams revealed vulnerabilities in our system," he acknowledged during a press briefing. "We've transformed those vulnerabilities into new strengths." Jasmine's parents, once denied visitor visas despite their daughter's Harvard acceptance, were now granted multi-year visas allowing regular visits. Their next trip would coincide with Jasmine's white coat ceremony, the symbolic induction into the medical profession that marked her transition from classroom learning to clinical training. For Jasmine personally, the most meaningful outcomes weren't the policy changes or legal victories, but the community she had helped build. The BSA had expanded its advocacy beyond campus, partnering with her foundation to support students nationwide. Alicia had become not just a roommate but a devoted friend who had stood by her through the darkest moments. And Zoe Patterson had transitioned from unexpected ally to mentor, now leading a specialized civil rights practice focused on transportation discrimination cases across the country. 1 year after Peterson had torn her visa, Jasmine boarded another Atlantic Airlines flight, this time voluntarily, traveling home to Lagos for a brief summer visit before her second year of medical school began. The airline's new CEO had personally reached out, asking her to evaluate their reformed procedures and training from a passenger perspective. As she settled into her first-class seat, a lifetime upgrade included in her settlement, Jasmine noticed a familiar face among the ground crew visible through the window: Harold Peterson, now employed loading baggage after being unable to secure another aviation customer service position. Their eyes met briefly as Peterson looked up from the tarmac. Jasmine felt no satisfaction in his downfall, only a sober recognition that accountability had finally reached someone who had likely discriminated against countless travelers before her. She gave him a small nod, not of forgiveness, but acknowledgement that justice, however delayed, had arrived. When the flight attendant offered her a pre-takeoff beverage, Jasmine requested water with a smile. "First time flying to Lagos?" the attendant asked conversationally. "No," Jasmine replied. "I'm going home to visit family. But I'll be returning to Harvard Medical School in 3 weeks to continue my studies." "That's wonderful," the attendant responded warmly. "Safe travels, Dr. Williams." The premature title reflected a future now securely back on track, a future that extended far beyond Harvard to the medical clinic Jasmine still planned to establish in Lagos. As the plane accelerated down the runway, Jasmine thought about how differently this journey had begun a year earlier. What Peterson couldn't have known when he tore her visa was that he wasn't destroying her future, he was unknowingly launching her into a larger purpose that would impact thousands of lives. The plane lifted into the sky, carrying Jasmine toward home and then back again to continue both her education and her advocacy. The journey had evolved from a single moment of discrimination into a movement for lasting change, proof that sometimes, the most powerful response to injustice is not just to overcome it, but to transform it into opportunity for others. Jasmine's story teaches us powerful lessons about standing up against discrimination. First, it shows how a single act of injustice, when confronted instead of accepted, can spark systemic change. Peterson's deliberate destruction of Jasmine's visa was meant to end her journey but instead catalyzed reforms affecting thousands. Second, the story highlights the importance of allies and community. Zoe's immediate intervention, Dr. Washington's decisive action, and the support from Harvard's BSA all demonstrate that fighting discrimination requires collective effort. No one person can change entrenched systems alone. Third, Jasmine's experience reveals how discrimination often hides behind protocols and security measures. The airline's formalized targeting program shows how racism becomes institutionalized through seemingly neutral policies and procedures. Fourth, her perseverance reminds us that fighting for justice often requires personal sacrifice. Despite academic pressures and settlement offers, Jasmine prioritized accountability over convenience because she understood the bigger picture. Finally, this story illustrates that true victory isn't just personal vindication but structural change. The new legislation, corporate reforms, and educational policies stemming from Jasmine's case will protect countless others facing similar discrimination. The path to equality isn't through accepting injustice but through challenging it strategically and persistently, even when powerful systems push back. Final call to action. Has discrimination ever touched your life or someone you know? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience might give courage to others facing similar challenges. Did Jasmine make the right choice refusing the initial settlement to fight for systemic change? Comment, justice, if you would have done the same, or practical, if you think taking the money would have been smarter. If this story of courage against discrimination moved you, please hit that like button to help more people discover it. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories of resilience and triumph against injustice. These racism stories matter because they show both the reality of discrimination and the possibility of change. Share this video with someone who needs inspiration to stand up for what's right. Thank you for joining this important conversation. Remember that every time we refuse to accept discrimination, we help create a more just world for everyone. Stay strong, stay righteous, and never underestimate your power to make a difference.